Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk Spoop. I'm your host, Don, and today we're working on something that I have been very much looking forward to doing for a while, which is my Hellraiser tier video. Since the remake came out, 4 months ago, 6 months ago, something like that, back last year, I have been intending to do a Hellraiser tier video to talk about all the different Hellraiser movies because I'm a fan of the franchise. And I finally have the opportunity to do that. I watched these movies over the span of about a week, rewatched every single one of them. Some of them were great, they gave you pleasure. Other ones gave me pain beyond imagining because they were god awful. So without further ado, I guess we'll just go ahead and jump into my Hellraiser tier video. I had everything in the proper order at the bottom. They are no longer in the proper order. Hopefully I remember the correct. So, of course we got to start with the original. So the first Hellraiser movie is very different from the whole rest of the franchise. The first Hellraiser movie is really more of a slasher with kind of this weird sexual well, I guess they all have that. There's a slasher with this weird sexual overtone, real sexual power to it. But it deals with a man, Frank, who has found the box and has used it to pull himself on accident into the dimension that the Cenobites live in, and then subsequently gets tortured to death. But his soul is trapped there, and due to some events, blood falls on the spot where he died, and he is able to come back. And then he manipulates the main character, Kirsty's stepmother, into murdering people so that he can harvest their skin and tissue to recreate himself. That's really it. It goes through. I'm not worried about spoilers. This movie's been out for a very long time, with the exception of the new one. But I'm still gonna talk. We don't really see much of the Cenobites throughout the movie. I think there's only about 5 minutes of Pinhead being in it, even though he's like the main Cenobite. But this was the beginning. This is what kind of set the tone, gave you your introduction to the series. But like I said, it's different. The other ones deal a lot more with the Cenobites. This one is not the same, but it is a great film, and it therefore goes into the pleasure category. Next, we have the direct sequel, Hellbound. Hellbound is immediately following the events of Hellraiser. Kirsty is in a mental asylum because she's talking about demons having destroyed her home and killed her family. While she's in this asylum, the head doctor, Dr. Chenard, overhears her talking, and turns out that he has been slowly collecting other puzzle boxes in an attempt to get into contact with the Cenobites, because he is all about that pleasure pain area. This movie is also very, very different. This one has Kirsty and an autistic girl named Tiffany who travel into the hell dimension and try to rescue her father. And Dr. Chenard gets turned into a Cenobite, which is the first time we see somebody become a Cenobite. It's very different. It has a weird feel to it, but it's good. It's not quite as good as the original, but it does a lot to expand the lore, and it does a lot to kind of further the story. So Hellraiser 2 Hellbound goes into the A category. All right, so now we get to Hellraiser 3. Hellraiser 3, at the end of Hellraiser 2, Pinhead gets turned back into his human form prior to dying. So he gets killed, sort of. But at the end, this like pillar comes out of this bloody mattress, and it's got like his face and some other Cenobites' faces and the puzzle box stuck in. And so said pillar gets bought by some random dude, and some random dude manages to steal the puzzle box off of the pillar, and that's how kind of events start. It follows this reporter who sees that guy come into the hospital and sees chains come out of nowhere to murder him. And then so she starts to investigate that. She meets the girlfriend of the dude who bought the statue. Um, and then Pinhead kind of manipulates that guy and the girlfriend into bringing him as Pinhead back. But at the same time, his human form is appearing in the reporter's dreams to try to get her to get them to meet up again so that he can beat Pinhead, essentially. Which she succeeds in, but he fails, and they recombine back into the true Pinhead. This is the second movie to have Cenobites, or people become Cenobites in it. However, they are made Cenobites by Pinhead, which makes them pseudo-Cenobites, according to everything I've read online. So not real Cenobites. But they still have, like, say, Cenobite powers, all that stuff. The story's not bad, but there's a lot of really stupid stuff in this movie. One of the Cenobites that gets created shoots CDs at people that are razor sharp and cut them to pieces, and one of them makes Molotov cocktails because he used to be a bartender, and one of them like has a camera lens for an eye, and I guess he shoots stuff out of it. It's really stupid. So not a great entry into the franchise, not a great movie. So number 3 goes down into the C category. Now we come to Bloodlines. Bloodlines is a personal favorite of mine. Bloodlines really expands kind of the history behind the Lament Configuration, expands the history behind the box, and gives you a definitive ending to the series, but then they continue to make more. Because the ending happens, 100 years in the future in space. It might not be 100 years, but far-flung future in space. Which is kind of weird. It's got some good kills. It's got really good story, but it takes place in space. I personally love it. However, it's not that great of a movie. But it does do a lot for the story. So Bloodlines is going to go into the B category. Now we go to the first movie that had absolutely no input from Clive Barker. So at some point, they started going direct to DVD, which is what Hellraiser Inferno is. They kind of stopped talking to Clive Barker about it, and what they really did is they had all these kind of fairly okay horror movies that they didn't think would sell well. So they were like, well, let's just throw some Cenobites in there. Let's make it a Hellraiser. Which Inferno is really the beginning of that. I personally really enjoy it. It is an interesting dive into psychology, kind of mental torture. It's about this crooked cop who goes to investigate a death. The guy died via opening the puzzle box. This cop is obsessed with like puzzles and games and stuff like that. So he obviously opens the puzzle box and things start going real bad for him real quick. But then it turns out that it's actually all in his head, because when he opened the puzzle box, the torture that the Cenobites decided to inflict on him was not physical torture. They went with psychological torture. I really enjoyed this movie, but it's definitely a steep drop from the previous movies in the franchise. So it goes into the B category below Bloodlines. Next, we have Hellraiser 6 Hellseeker. So, Hellseeker is interesting. They bring back Kirsty to play herself. And the movie opens with her in the car with her husband. The car goes off the side of the road. and he gets out of the car, tries to get her out of the car, fails to get her out of the car, and she vanishes. And now he's being investigated by the cops for possibly murdering his wife. As the story unfolds, he starts to get his memory back because he has amnesia from the car accident. He starts to realize that A, he's not a great guy. Um, B, he and his wife had a terrible relationship. C, he was cheating on his wife. And D, he had planned to murder his wife with a coworker in order to get her very large inheritance because she got money from Frank and money from her dad when they both died. Therefore, she's got a good amount of money. So that's interesting. They kind of tried to do the psychological thing that they kind of did in Inferno, because it turns out that in actuality, she murdered him when he gave her the puzzle box. So he gave her the puzzle box. She knew exactly what it was. They get into a fight. She opens it, goes into the hell world to talk to Pinhead, and offers him 5 souls in exchange for allowing her to live. Which is also where we kind of start to see Kirsty kind of take a downslope in her character, which is one of the reasons that Clive Barker absolutely hates this movie. Because up till this point, Kirsty is a good person, and she's been a good person from the first 2 movies. So it doesn't really make sense for her to just be like, I'm going to kill 5 people just because my husband is a piece of crap. But that's what she does. So it turns out that in actuality, when the car creamed off the side of the road, she had shot him in the head, and then she climbed out of the car. And then it ends with her getting the puzzle box back. And it kind of takes place in a weird spot in the time. This movie's not terrible, but it's not good. And I see why Clive Barker doesn't. So it's going to go in the C category above 3. Yeah, C category above 3. Next, we get into the real downward slope for Hellraiser movies, which is Hellraiser 7 Deader. Correction. Yeah, Deader. So, in Hellraiser 7, another reporter has been sent to investigate this cult in Europe that supposedly kills people and resurrects them as true if they're true enough believers. The story makes very little sense. They kind of try to connect it back to 4, with having the leader of the cult be related to the Marchand, who is the guy that made the Lament Configuration. But they did a really bad job. Somehow he has necromancy. They never explain how. The girl that's the main character is like seeing things, and it's not really clear what's actually happening, who's actually dead, who's alive. It's a mess. Therefore, it goes into the beginning of Pain Beyond Imagining. This movie is hard to watch, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. Then we get to 8, Jeremiah's absolute favorite Hellraiser movie, which is Hellworld. In this movie, somebody created a video game based off of the history behind the puzzle box. I keep calling it Lamont Configuration. It's the Marchand configuration, but whatever. So he creates a video game off it. One of the characters' best friend got them into this game, but he got obsessed with it, ended up committing suicide. Or he was killed by the Cenobites, not clear. And so his friends are still kind of playing the game, and they unlock this party. So like a real world party that these online gamers can all go to. The group of friends go to this party. They meet Lance Henriksen, which this movie should have been my hint that Lance Henriksen's career was going on a quick downward spiral. He is supposedly the guy putting on the party, owns the house, whatever. And then they all start dying. But in actuality, none of the things that they're seeing is actually happening. He drugged all of them and then buried them in the yard and gave them cell phones, and then used subliminal messaging to make them think that they were dying. Um, it's it's real dumb. The puzzle box doesn't really make an appearance until the very end, where Lance Henriksen, is sitting in a hotel room after having successfully gotten 3 people to die, and he's like playing with it, and he accidentally unlocks it, and the Cenobites show up and they move. It is it's jumpy. It's got a more coherent story to it than Deader does, but it's just really stupid and just not fun to watch. So this one goes into Pain Beyond Imagining above Deader because the story is at least coherent, but it is garbage. Yeah. Now we get to Revelations. Spoiler alert. This is probably the worst Hellraiser. It's the first time that Doug Bradley does not appear as Pinhead, which is fine. The guy's getting old. Understandable. First, the guy who they replaced him with tries very hard to do like a Doug Bradley impression, and he does it absolutely horrible. It is jarring. It deals with this family, these 2 families that both had sons that vanished in Mexico. And they got like a video back of their time in Mexico, and they see that they may or may not have murdered a hooker, sex worker, and that they got their hands on the puzzle box, opened it, the Cenobites showed up and killed them, and they're all kind of just processing that. And whilst they're processing that, the sister of one of them, who's also was dating the other one, finds the puzzle box and is like messing with it. And then she like opens it, and when she opens it, the brother comes back. Everybody's all like super happy. But in actuality, it's not the brother, it's the other guy. He had murdered the brother and stole his skin. So I give them props because they attempted to combine kind of like the evolving story of the Cenobites with the original story of the first Hellraiser, where it was Frank who got pulled into the box and that he needed to get his skin back so he could escape. So cool on that, but everything else about this movie is just so disappointing and so terrible. It is by far the worst Hellraiser, without a question. It is painful. All right, now that that's out of the way, we have a tricky one. We have Hellraiser Judgment. I'm not really sure how I feel about this movie. So this one's different. It deals with these cops that are investigating. I can't remember what they called him. A murderer, a serial killer, who is killing people kind of in a Seven-esque way. But instead of being the 7 deadly sins, it's people who have violated the 10 commandments. And he's going around murdering them. And he calls himself it began with a P. I can't remember it now. And it turns out, or as they're investigating this, everybody's linked to this one pedophile. So the main cop goes to investigate. So while that's happening, there's like this. He goes to this house, and this house has a Cenobite who is like he records their sins. So they tie him down, and he tells them their sins, and he writes them out on a typewriter. And then another guy comes in and he eats the written sins, and then he vomits that up. And then they use that to decide how to properly punish the person. And this is all ran by Pinhead. So this cop shows up, and when his sins get given to the guy who eats them, he chokes on them and dies because that's what happened there. And then an angel shows up and is like, yo, leave this dude alone. We've got a purpose for him. Can't touch him. So the implication is this guy is such a good person that the Cenobites have no power to do anything to him. But in actuality, he's the serial killer and he's killing people in the name of heaven. And I guess heaven is going to use that as a way to draw more people into the faith. So he gets his partner and his wife, who were having an affair, and he makes the partner open the box. And then Pinhead shows up, and then Pinhead wants to kill him because he forced the guy to open the box. Does the same thing as opening it himself, which wasn't a logic they used in Hellraiser 2. So he wants to kill him. The angel shows back up, forces them to let him go, and when he gets let go, he immediately gets shot in the head by another cop. And like Pinhead has a little bit of a laugh at it. The angel's like, "You knew that would happen. You have violated what we wanted you to do. You're gonna pay for this." And Pinhead gets a little drunk on his power and uses the Pinhead chains or whatever to murder an angel, which is weird. And then he is like, "What are they going to do to me? What punishment could they possibly give me? I just enjoy pain." And the guy who was like the typewriter guy is like, "Well, there's something worse that you didn't think about. What about banishment?" And then he gets turned back into a normal person. He's just like a homeless dude on the street, and that's the end of the movie. So this is a weird one. It doesn't feel like a Hellraiser movie. It has the Cenobites, but it's very different. Like this is something we've never seen them do before. It was interesting. It was unique. It wasn't bad, but it also didn't feel like a Hellraiser movie. So I'm gonna put it in the middle category, below all the actual ones that at least felt Hellraiser-esque. Yeah. All right, and now finally, we get to the remake. Maybe. Uh, there's some internet theories online that I actually really enjoy that say that it's not a remake, it's actually a sequel, and that the new Pinhead is actually Kirsty, which I could be down, especially because in the comics she does replace Pinhead as the Hell Priest, becomes the Hell Priestess. So it would be an interesting twist if they make a sequel. I would be happy to see that, or something completely different. But whatever. So this movie did a lot. It changed a lot of the established lore behind the puzzle box. It gave it multiple configurations. The idea is that if you use the puzzle box to give 5 souls to Leviathan, then you will be granted one of, I think it's 6 prizes, which is like pleasure, resurrection, power, knowledge. I can't remember. So it follows Riley, who is a drug addict who is recovering, and her and her boyfriend mostly follows them. So she gets into an argument with her brother, who she lives with. And so she goes to her boyfriend. They decide that they need some money. So they break into this warehouse that he knows about, crack open the safe, and all that's in it is the puzzle box. And so she goes home super drunk, gets into a fight with her brother, leaves, pops some pills, goes to the park, starts playing with the puzzle box. And when you unlock the first configure or the second configuration of the puzzle box, a knife is supposed to come out and cut you to mark you as the next victim of the Cenobites. But she happened to move her hand out of the way, and it missed her. And then Pinhead shows up and is like, "That knife was meant for you. You have to give us someone." She's like, "No way, man." And then her brother shows up because her brother's freaking out because he's worried about her. And he picks up the box and he cuts himself. And so obviously the Cenobites take him. And so she goes on kind of this quest to figure out what's going on with the box, finds out that she can resurrect her brother using it, and then decides that's what she wants to do. And so the whole story unravels. I don't want to spoil it because it is fairly new. So I'm not going to spoil it. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I thought it was a really good take, a really good change. I loved the costumes that they gave them, which instead of going with like the tight leather that they used in the previous and all the other Hellraiser movies, this is like made to look like their flayed skin is being used as a garment over their musculature essentially. It was creepy. There were some scenes in it that I wasn't 100% for, um, but I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in A above Hellraiser 2, but not quite into the pleasure, the level of the original Hellraiser. So yeah, that is my tier ranking of the entirety of the Hellraiser series. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave any comments in the comment section down below. Your thoughts, what you would change, any of that jazz. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Bye.